After months of painstaking negotiations, a deal to allow Ukraine to resume its grain exports has been reached. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres was in Istanbul to witness the signing of the landmark agreement between Turkey, Ukraine and Russia. Hopes are high that the deal will finally lay to rest months of uncertainty about the world's food supply due to Russia's ongoing attack on Ukraine. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan said a joint coordination center would be set up in Istanbul to oversee the implementation of the deal. The agreement signed by Russian and Ukrainian officials will reopen critical ports on the Black Sea to allow for the resumption of grain exports. When the conflict first broke out back in late February, Russia moved to seize and blockade much of Ukraine's southern coast. More than 20 million tons of grain are believed to be stuck in Ukrainian ports. So what impact will this deal have on global food supplies, and will Kiev and Moscow be able to stick to the agreement? And to discuss the landmark grain deal between Ukraine and Russia, joining me now from Istanbul is Selim Yenel. He is a former Turkish ambassador. From Warsaw, Spasimir Domaradzki. He is an assistant professor at the University of Warsaw and the Institute of Central Europe. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you on the program. Izzet, as a former diplomat, could you talk to us about the significance of this grain deal?
Well, I think that it just showed that not following the EU track on sanctions was correct. It's very important that Turkey was the go-between between the two countries and could act in this way. So it's a big deal for Turkey. And it's important to have such a country that actually could talk to both sides. And it was very important to have the UN Secretary General come here. He called it a beacon of hope. I call it a sliver of hope. Now we have to see it implemented. And I do hope that both sides will be able to actually implement this deal, which will actually be hopeful for the future. This is one step in that direction. And I think that Turkey played a very important role in this way.
So, Spasimir, what's your take on this deal?
Well, on one hand, it is undoubtedly a very urgent matter and a very important issue to be resolved. But on the other hand, we have to admit that this is an issue that, will have an impact on the future development in the Russian-Ukrainian war. I have to admit that undoubtedly it is a sign of hope. And I agree that there is a possibility that the two sides now have a play field for negotiations, but this is a role that actually Turkey was looking for from the only beginning of the conflict. On the other hand, I think that the devil is in the details, and it is very interesting if we look at the details of this agreement, that actually it is not an agreement signed between Russia and Ukraine. It is an agreement signed between Turkey and the two countries, having in mind the mechanisms, how this is going to be implemented. It still comes to see how this is going to unfold. I'm a little bit skeptical, although I really hope that in terms of tackling the prospective famine and food crisis, this is a step forward.
So, where would this deal put Turkey's international position, both as a NATO member, ally, and a country with strong ties with Russia?
Well, it just showed that Turkey can play both sides. And I also agree with what the previous speaker spoke, because the two sides don't trust each other, and Turkey is the go-between. If you look at the signing ceremony, you saw that the defense minister of Turkey and the defense minister of Russia were signing it first, and then it was the Ukrainian defense minister with the Turkish defense minister. So those two people were not at the same table.
Yes.
Although some news outlets, international news outlets, made a mistake of saying it was the Ukrainian and the Russian defense minister signing and then shaking hands. It was not the case. So Turkey is playing a very important role in this place. And I think that this will continue.
This will continue. So, Spasimir, how do you think Turkey managed to broker a deal between warring sides?
Well, this is a very important step, undoubtedly. But I have to admit that I have a little bit more mixed feelings. First and foremost, because the West took a very clear position, and it is the dissatisfaction with what the Russians are doing, the way how they handle their relations with Ukraine, is an unacceptable matter, and it required sanctions and very firm position. Russia is in a position now that it needs allies, it needs friends, it needs countries with which it is able to conduct relations and to show, in particular, to its own internal public that it is still respected. But Russia is a rogue state. And in that sense, it is always difficult to communicate with rogue states. It is a problem in itself. On the other hand, I think that one reason why Russia went for an agreement in that respect is, on one hand, because the sanctions work, and the second thing is because Ukraine started invested a lot of energy, both together with with the countries that support it, to find alternative routes for grain export.
Yes,
and that would have it was just the last week that there was a news about the improvement of the river communication between Ukraine and Romania, which could actually take some portion of the grain, and that forced Russia, I think, to the negotiation
yes.
table. Because the solution would have resolved the problem anyway.
So is this a concession on Russia's side, and what does Russia stand to gain from this deal?
Well, I think that it's trying to show that it can actually play in a way that they are making some progress for the international community, that they're showing their humane side, if you might say, because what we're seeing right now in Ukraine is atrocious, what we're seeing there. And so I think they're trying to show their good side. But as we just spoke, it's about implementation. There could be a lot of hiccups on the way, and we might see that this is not going to actually come true. But now we have this monitoring, establishment in Istanbul. So it's going to be very carefully monitored. And I think that Turkey has, again, a role to play with regard to the implementation of this deal. Let's just see where this goes.
So, Spasimir, I mean, what are the challenges that lie ahead with this deal? What factors or incidents could derail it?
Well, there are so many possible scenarios that it is difficult to mention them all. Undoubtedly, one thing, and that's what's puzzling me since the moment when I heard that it was going to be signed, was how exactly this is going to function, especially that the Ukrainian side draws very clear red lines saying that there should be absolutely no convoying by Russian ships, that there will be no cooperation with Russians. So technically, as I understand it, it is the ability to have the free navigation through the Black Sea, which is not an issue at the moment. Secondly, we know that the military activities caused a number of hurdles. There were stories about mines being detected in Bulgarian waters, which apparently come from the conflict area. So we can expect many, I would say, expected and unexpected difficulties, and it would be an enormous achievement, I agree, if this will be able to function. It will show that Turkey can play the role of a middleman, in a sense, between the two sides. I really wish, I think, as all the people across the world, that would be a step forward towards a peace solution. But I'm very much afraid that can only be a moment in which there will be an attempt to show a more humane face of the Russian aggression, and it will have a very negative impact in the near future.
So are there any risks for Turkey, for example, in the event of a naval standoff between Russia and Ukraine? What would Turkey's position be, and is the Black Sea poised to become another hotspot?
Well, I think Turkey would, again, try to mediate between the two sides. I mean, there's a limit of what Turkey can do, of course. But now that there is an agreement signed, it's on paper, and there's a commitment by the highest level. So I think that they will, at least in the beginning, show some good behavior. I don't expect any kind of, let's say, difficulties in the beginning, but it could happen. And if it does happen, then Turkey will again start to play its role as a go-between, as a mediator. But as I said, there's a limit to do that. And of course, it's important that the two sides continue to trust Turkey to play this role. That's the crucial part of being a mediator.
So, Spasimir, does this deal make Western-led sanctions on Russia redundant? I mean, has Russian criticism of the West for inconsistent policies been proven right?
Well, the European Union has its own problems related to this policy of sanctions, and it stems from both the long-lasting dependence on Russian natural resources, the economic problems that the European Union is facing. But I would not question the logic of the sanctions, because if you think in practical terms, the logic of the sanctions is nothing else but the only tool that in liberal international order countries can use in order to show that someone behaves wrongly. And if we depart from the sanctions in search of whatever solution just for the sake of ending the conflict, having in mind that that the two sides are equally guilty, then we will completely disregard the basic principles of international relations around which the whole international community stands for the last 70 years. And this is exactly what Russia wants. So I would say we have to be very careful to balance between the implications that the sanctions trigger for the Russian reality and the search for solutions that save lives around the world.
So Izzet, could this be the first step towards a wider deal to reduce the hostilities in southeastern Ukraine?
Well, I don't think I would go that far. This happened because there was a crisis in the foodstuffs, especially with regard to many African countries around the world. And I think Russia wanted to show its good side to those countries that it's going to help them. I mean, what's going on in Ukraine, it's a war. I doubt if this will actually make much of a dent on what's going on there, but at least it's something to stand on. But let's not get our hopes on ending the war with this kind of agreement.
You both are so cautious towards this deal. Spasimir, what impact will this deal have on averting global food crisis, and are we likely to see a direct impact of this deal on food prices across the world?
Well, there is no doubt that that was the needed step in order to give the chance, because let's remind that most of the grain exported by Ukraine goes exactly to recipients in the third world countries, or developing countries, as it's being called now, countries from Africa and Asia. And for them, this is an extremely important agreement. It was not by chance, but that the United Nations got involved because the consequences of this deadlock between Ukraine and Russia would have been felt globally. And in that sense, it is an important step. Let's just hope that it is going to be efficient enough to see this problem at least resolved.
All right, gentlemen, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk.